In this video, I'm going to tell you what I think is the number one most important way to start planning an English lesson. And because this is the internet, I should start with a disclaimer. This is not the only way to plan it. I'm not saying your way is wrong. What I'm saying is this is what has worked for me for nearly 20 years. So the most important question to start with is, when the students leave the classroom, what should they be able to do? This may literally seem like a backwards way to approach it. However, if we know what the students will leave the classroom being able to do, then we know what production activity we are going to do. We know what practice they need to do, what language do they need to practice. We know what input we need to give them. And we also know what schema we need to activate at the beginning. So it's so much easier when you're working back that way, rather than thinking, oh, okay, how do I start the class? Then can I find some kind of input? Oh, what kind of practice can I do with this input? Now, what's an activity we can do using that kind of language? It's so much easier to work backwards. And to help stay focused on what that goal is, you're going to write an SWBAT statement. So that is students will be able to, and you're going to fill it with very specific information. Again, this is not the only way to do it. Feel free to put how you do this in the comments below, but here's how I would do it. So here's an example of a Swabat statement, SWBAT statement. So students will be able to complain using to, not enough, to a server in a restaurant. Another example of an SWBAT statement might be, students will be able to write a business email to a colleague from another department, rescheduling a meeting using apologetic phrases. So, dear viewer, how this helps us when we're planning backwards is, if we know this is what they will leave being able to do, then we know, okay, so the production part is going to be a role play with one student being a customer complaining to another student who is the server. Therefore, we know the practice stage is going to be practicing to with adjectives and not enough with adjectives. Too hot, too spicy, too cold, not hot enough, not cold enough, not spicy enough, etc. Therefore, we know the input is going to be some kind of dialogue, restaurant dialogue, complaining, using that language. Therefore, we know the schema is going to be thinking about bad experiences in restaurants. So it's so much easier to work backwards using that statement than to try and work forwards without one. Your Swabat statement is going to contain 4 things. Number 1, it's going to have a purpose. So why is the communication happening? Number 2, a visible or measurable action. We will come back to this a little bit later. Number 3, target language. So what English phrases, vocab, grammar, whatever are we practicing? And the most forgotten one is an audience. So who are we speaking to? Because this will affect the kind of language that we use. So for example, is it formal? Is it casual language? Are we in a job interview, or are we chatting to a friend? And the genre. So for writing, genre can be very simple, such as, is it an email or a shopping list? Is it a cover letter or an essay? For speaking, it would be mostly things like, is it face-to-face? Is it on the telephone, etc. Now, some people might be thinking, I'm teaching English, so apart from target language, why do we need the other things? Well, every other real-world communication interaction has those other elements. And even if you're thinking, hey, I write a diary, there's no audience for a diary, guess what? The audience is you. Therefore, if we're going to teach good communicative English, we need those other elements. Returning to our visible purposes, our purpose is often referred to as a function. It's the type of communication. Therefore, that purpose must be observable to the teacher. So in our previous examples, the functions were complaining and rescheduling. We can see it, we can measure it, we can hear or see that the students are complaining or rescheduling. What we don't want are words like know and understand, because we cannot see that that is happening. We cannot see that students are understanding superlatives. We cannot see that they are knowing irregular past. So we can use words like this, like describing, explaining, comparing, giving an ultimatum, reprimanding. So these are great function words. This is our purpose, right? This is why we are communicating. So when we're writing our Swabat statement, we want to use these function words. So what is the purpose of that communication? Plus, it's measurable. We can see that it's happening, so we know that the students are being successful at that communication task. So let's look back at our original Swabat statements and see what pieces we have. So complain using to, not enough to a server in a restaurant. So complain, we have our visible action, so our function. Target language, to, not enough, and audience is the server in a restaurant. With our second example, writing a business email to a colleague from another department. So the format and genre, because it's writing, is business email. Our audience is a colleague from another department. The purpose is rescheduling a meeting. And the target language is apologetic phrases. So there you go. If you plan backwards, it's so much easier. And if you have a good students will be able to statement, it will keep you focused and keep your classroom communicative. In the next episode, we are going to think about how to start a class. Literally from walking into the classroom, what's the best way to get good results?